My mother orchestrated a cruel and savage prank involving my dog being run over and then wanting to live in my house. But karma doesn't play tricks on things like that. I, 41, need advice about a situation with my 62-year-old mother that is quickly spiraling out of control. I can tell you right off the bat that we don't have a good relationship. The reason being her temperament, which made living in her childhood home feel like living in a minefield. One where you never know when it's going to explode. You never knew what would set her off. The physical punishment and yelling were constant. At 18, I couldn't take it anymore. My guidance counselor helped me find an apartment and a part-time job. I moved in that weekend while my mom was visiting her sister's house. Over the years, I tried to rebuild some kind of relationship with her. Not because I wanted to, but because everyone told me, she's still your mother, whatever that means. We established a distant but civil connection, phone calls every few weeks, brief visits when I traveled to her state to see my children. They live with my ex-husband, Harry, 43, about 20 minutes from my mother's house. This arrangement is because I moved for work after the divorce, and we decided they should stay there for school. However, they spend their vacations with me, and I travel frequently to visit them. Last month, my mother called me with some news. She's selling her house and moving back to Poland, where her family is originally from. My sister Lena, 35, moved there 5 years ago. My mother's pension will go further in Poland, and she wants to be closer to Lena and her grandchildren there. This is where the problem arises. My mother explained to me that she needs a place to stay for a few months, between selling her house and moving abroad. He asked if he could stay with me. I immediately knew that could never happen, but I didn't tell him that directly. I just told him I'd think about it and get back to him later. The truth is, my mother hasn't changed. She's still the same volatile person she always was. The abuse may be in the past, but her behavior remains unpredictable and often cruel. I want to share a recent incident that perfectly explains why I can't have her in my house. 3 months ago, I was driving to visit my children. I brought along my dog, Bailey, a mixed-breed dog I adopted from the shelter 6 months earlier. Bailey adjusted wonderfully to life with me and travels well in the car. I was planning to see my children for a long weekend. Initially, I intended to take Bailey to Harry's house, but my mother offered to watch her while I visited my children, and Harry wasn't too keen on the idea of Bailey staying at his house. The first day went well. My mom sent me some photos of Bailey sleeping on her couch and eating candy. She texted me that Bailey seemed to miss me, but that she was okay. The next day, I decided to visit my children again. My mom offered to babysit Bailey for the second time. About 3 hours after arriving at Harry's house, I texted my mom to check on Bailey. My mother texted me that Bailey had escaped from the yard when she turned around for a second. She said she and her boyfriend, Frank, were searching the neighborhood, but couldn't find Bailey anywhere. I tried to remain calm. I told her I'd finish lunch with my kids, take them home, and then drive back to help look for her. I needed to handle things responsibly with my kids. During the drive back, my mom bombarded me with increasingly frantic messages, first saying they couldn't find Bailey, then blaming me for not getting back fast enough, and then asking how I could abandon my dog all day. When I was about 20 minutes from my mom's house, she sent me the worst text ever. Bailey had been found, hit by a car, and she was dead. I stopped immediately, my hand shaking so much I could barely hold the phone. I called my mother, barely able to speak through my tears. She sounded upset too, crying with me. She changed her story, saying that Bailey wasn't completely dead, but just barely hanging on. When I begged him to take Bailey to the emergency vet, he refused, saying he was afraid moving Bailey would make things worse. I drove the rest of the way in a complete panic. When I got to my mom's house, I found cars parked all over the street. Upon entering, I discovered about 15 people in her garden, drinking and laughing around a barbecue. Something wasn't right. My mother led me to her back room. There was Bailey, perfectly fine, wagging her tail and excited to see me. She'd never been lost or hurt before. The whole situation was a joke from my mom. My mother laughed hysterically at my reaction. I silently gathered Bailey's things and left without speaking to her. I spent the night in my hotel and drove back home the next morning. That's just one example of why living with my mother is impossible. Another situation with my mother was the following. During my divorce from Harry 5 years ago, I was going through a difficult time. The divorce wasn't hostile, but it was a divorce nonetheless. I had moved for work and visited them regularly. During this difficult time, my house wasn't spotless, nothing dangerous or unhealthy, just the home of someone going through a rough patch. One day my mom called, saying she was in town and wanted to visit. I hesitated because I knew she'd be critical of everything in my house, but she insisted she just wanted to offer support and check on me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. During her visit, my mother commented on the broken toilet seat, looked through my refrigerator, and pointed out some expired yogurt. She also noticed the dishes in the sink and watched me spill dog food, then vacuum it up instead of sweeping it up. I defended myself, saying I was doing the best I could. She didn't say much more about it. A week after she left, a Child Protective Services worker knocked on my door. Someone had reported me for child neglect. As the worker inspected my home, specifically looking at the refrigerator and bathroom, I immediately knew who had made the call. The worker found no major problems, only suggested I keep things tidier, and scheduled a follow-up visit. I called Harry as soon as the worker entered my home and told him everything that had happened. Harry left an angry voicemail for my mother, telling her she would never see our children again. I called her later that day to confront her. At first, he denied having filed the complaint, then admitted he called services because no child should have to live with a broken toilet seat, and that the fact that I vacuumed up dog food instead of sweeping showed I was unstable. We didn't speak for months after that. And when we got back in touch, things were still tense. The third reason I can't live with my mother has to do with her drinking. About 11 years ago, I lived with her briefly after my divorce left me in a difficult financial situation. She was drinking heavily at the time, often driving home drunk from bars or friends' houses. We had huge fights when I tried to take her keys to keep her from driving drunk. The environment was so toxic that I moved out as soon as I could afford a place of my own. My mother had been sober for many years before that relapse, but she never acknowledged her drinking problem. Today, she still drinks heavily most nights. Given this history, there's no way I can let her move in with me, even temporarily. I simply stopped responding to her messages, especially the one about moving out. This wasn't unusual in our relationship, as I'm usually the one who initiates contact. My mother rarely communicates unless she needs something. 2 weeks went by without contact. Then, yesterday, I posted some photos on Facebook of a small get-together with my stepsister and my father's second wife, Marta, who has been more of a mother to me than my own mother. Within minutes, my mother commented on the photos saying, "Who cares?" followed by, "Have fun," and finally, "Don't contact me anymore." I deleted those comments because they were embarrassing and inappropriate. Almost immediately, my mother started sending me private messages. She declared she was done with me and told me to stay away from her side of the state when I visited my children. She told me not to act sorry and removed me from her Facebook friends list. His last message said, "Damn it, I'm done with you. Good luck with your life. I hope you're happier with Marta now." It's clear his outburst was triggered by seeing me with Marta. There's an important story there. When my father passed away 4 years ago, he left Marta, his second wife, a modest insurance policy. Marta used the money to build a small new house for herself, and then gave me her old apartment to live in, rent-free, as a thank you for helping with my father's affairs after his death. My mother was furious about this arrangement, convinced that Marta had received millions. It was actually less than $200,000, and that she somehow deserved a share, despite having divorced my father 25 years before he married Marta. The photos that caused my mother's outburst were taken in Marta's new house. Seeing me comfortable and welcome in Marta's house probably triggered her jealousy. The irony is that my mom's tantrum solved my original problem, which was telling her she couldn't move in with me. Now she's the one who's cut off contact. Update 1. 3 weeks have passed since my mom had that Facebook tantrum, and there have been a few developments I wanted to share. For the first 2 weeks after her outburst, there was a deathly silence. Nothing from my mom, and that felt great. Then, exactly 15 days after her "I'm done with you" text, my mom started calling me, first once a day, then up to 3 or 4 times a day. I didn't respond. In one of the messages, she sobbed that she missed me and wanted to make up. In the next one, recorded just hours later, she was angry and cursing everything she could find about me, including Bailey. After 5 days of ignored calls, she changed tactics. She started texting my ex-husband, Harry, asking him to call the kids. Harry, to his credit, reminded her that she'd been banned from contacting our children after the incident with Child Protective Services years earlier, and that nothing had changed. That was the decision we made together. That's when things got even worse. Last weekend, I drove to Harry's estate to visit my children. We spent Saturday at a local park having a picnic. As we were gathering all our things to leave, I noticed a family car in the parking lot. My mother was sitting inside, watching us. Harry noticed her too, and immediately gathered the children. I approached my mother's car, and she rolled down her window. I asked her why she was there. She claimed she was just in the same park by chance, and she happened to see us. When I pointed out that the whole situation was very strange, she became defensive and left. That same night, Harry called me to tell me my mother had shown up at his house demanding to see the children. When he refused, she started screaming. Eventually, he had to threaten to call the police before she left. The next morning, my mother called me while I was still at my hotel. I answered, hoping to de-escalate the situation. She talked to me about my children, but I told her that since the incident with her call, I wouldn't be seeing her grandchildren. Then she abruptly changed the subject, asking if I'd given any further thought to her staying with me after the sale of her house. I told her straight out that she couldn't stay with me, not for a few months, not for a few weeks, not even for a few hours. She was silent for a moment, then asked, "Is this because of Marta? Are you choosing her over your own mother?" I explained that my decision had nothing to do with Marta and everything to do with her past behavior, including the prank with Bailey and the call to protective services. I told her those actions had consequences, and one of them was that I couldn't trust her in my home. She hung up. Later that day, as I was checking out of my hotel, the desk clerk handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother. She must have left it at the front desk, knowing which hotel I usually choose when visiting my children. The letter was strange, part apology, part justification, part emotional manipulation. She wrote that she never meant to hurt me with a Bailey prank, that it was just a joke that went too far when she was a little lighthearted. Regarding the call to protective services, she stated that she was genuinely concerned about the cleanliness of my house and thought I was doing the right thing by reporting me. She then wrote that she had received an offer on her house and that it would sell faster than expected. She needed a place to stay within 30 days. He suggested that if I wouldn't let her move in with me, I should at least help pay for a hotel or apartment for the long term, until she moved to Poland. She ended up writing, "This is what the family does for each of us. I raised you, fed you, and clothed you for 18 years, and now I'm asking for a few months of help in return." When I arrived home Sunday night, I found my mother had left multiple messages with management, claiming a family emergency and demanding access to my apartment. Fortunately, they refused. On Monday morning, I received an email from Frank, my mom's boyfriend. He apologized for contacting me behind her back, but I felt I should know that my mom had been drinking heavily every day since our fight. He wrote that he'd become obsessed with moving in with me, and went on about how he'd finally make me understand what family means once he lived under my roof. I called my apartment management and confirmed that they would not allow my mother access to my unit under any circumstances. I also installed a video doorbell and an additional lock on my door. Yesterday, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It was my Aunt Teresa, my mother's sister, contacting me from Poland. She said my mother had called her upset. Teresa wanted to know my side of the story. I briefly explained the situation, including everything you already know. Apparently, my mother not only made jokes throughout her life, but she wasn't very good at creating new ones. She told Teresa that her cat had been hit by a car when they were teenagers, only to reveal later that it was a joke, after Teresa had been crying for hours. Teresa also mentioned that my mother's plans to move to Poland might be more fantasy than reality. Although my mother had talked about it for years, she hadn't taken any concrete steps to move. She hadn't applied for any necessary documents, hadn't researched housing, and hadn't even figured out what she would need to update her Polish citizenship. This revelation made me wonder if the whole "I need to stay with you while I prepare to move to Poland" situation was fabricated just to get into my apartment. Remember, this apartment has some connection to my mother because it belongs to Teresa. I'm worried about my mother's mental state because this is extremely erratic behavior. I've considered filing for a restraining order while still maintaining zero contact with her. I've warned Harry about the situation, and he's also taking precautions with our children. Update 2. One morning, I received a call from her neighbor. He explained that my mother had been taken to the hospital after Frank found her unconscious at home. She had mixed alcohol with her blood pressure medication, causing her blood pressure to drop dangerously low or something like that. Her neighbor said Frank asked him to notify me as next of kin. I contacted the hospital and spoke with my mother's doctor. He couldn't share many details due to privacy laws, but he confirmed that she was stable and would likely be discharged in a day or two. He mentioned that she had been referred for a substance abuse evaluation. I decided not to visit her in the hospital. I didn't see the point. The day after my mother was discharged, I received an email from Frank. He explained that the incident had frightened my mother so much that she had agreed to attend an outpatient alcohol treatment program. She also mentioned that the sale of her house had fallen through after the inspection revealed serious structural problems that would cost tens of thousands of dollars to repair. 2 weeks passed without any contact from my mother. Then, Harry called me worried. She explained that my mother had shown up at our daughter's school, trying to get her out to go to lunch. The school, following our explicit instructions, refused to release our daughter and immediately called Harry. By the time he arrived, my mother had already left. That same day, I received a letter from a lawyer my mother had hired. The letter requested visitation rights for the grandparents and suggested that if I didn't agree to allow regular contact between my mother and our children, she would take legal action. The letter made it sound as if she were a grandmother with more love than Jesus, and that she just wanted to be close to her grandchildren. Terrifying. Harry and I contacted our family law attorney immediately. She explained that although grandparent visitation laws vary by state, most require proof of an existing relationship with the grandchildren, which would be harmed if severed. Given that my mother had had minimal contact with our children over the years by her own choice, and that both of us opposed visitation due to legitimate safety concerns, the case likely wouldn't proceed. Still, we needed to respond formally. Our lawyer drafted a response, which, given everything she's done over the years and more recently, should be sufficient. We included statements from Harry's parents, who had witnessed some of my mother's erratic behavior over the years. A week later, Harry received a call from a mutual friend who had run into my mother at the supermarket. My mother told this friend that she would be moving to Poland any moment, and that Harry and the children would be joining her there. This friend, knowing this to be completely false, became concerned enough to warn Harry about my mother's apparent delusions. Around this time, I also discovered that my mother had created a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Help Grandma Reunite with Her Family." The page included childhood photos of me and my children taken from my private Facebook account, and a fabricated story about how I had cut her off after my father's death because I blamed her for his passing. The campaign claimed that she needed money for legal fees to rescue her grandchildren from an abusive situation. I reported the GoFundMe campaign for fraudulent claims and unauthorized use of my children's photos. It was deleted within 24 hours, but not before my mother had raised nearly $700 from sympathetic strangers. The latest development occurred yesterday. Frank called me, sounding exhausted. He explained that my mother had stopped attending her alcohol treatment sessions after only 2 weeks. Her drinking had increased again, even surpassing her previous level, and her behavior had become increasingly paranoid. She had begun telling friends and family that I was stealing money from her accounts, and that Marta was conspiring with me to keep her away from her family. Frank revealed that he had decided to end his relationship with her. He could no longer stand the chaos and felt that her presence was enabling his behavior. Before moving, she wanted to warn me that my mother had mentioned plans to surprise me by showing up at my workplace and exposing me to my coworkers. I immediately contacted my company's security team and provided them with my mother's photo and personal information. I also spoke to my manager to briefly explain the situation in case my mother followed through on her threat. I then filed for a restraining order. The temporary order was granted, and a hearing for the permanent order has been scheduled for next month. I also contacted Teresa again in Poland. I explained the situation and asked if anyone in the family there could check on my mother or offer support. Teresa revealed that my mother had burned bridges with most of the family in Poland years ago. For now, the restraining order provides some peace of mind, although I remain vigilant about my safety and that of my children. I'd say Harry's too, but while it includes him, he doesn't need her. I think he's big and strong enough to handle a neurotic, alcoholic old lady. Update 3. After the restraining order was granted, things were quiet for about a month. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from a hospital in my mother's hometown. A nurse explained that my mother had been admitted after what appeared to be a stroke, but tests revealed it was actually a severe urinary tract infection, which, left untreated, had affected her cognitive function, mimicking the symptoms of a stroke. That even though I had a restraining order against her, I was still her emergency contact. After speaking with my mother's doctors, I learned she would need several weeks of inpatient care followed by rehabilitation. The hospital social worker then contacted me, explaining that my mother's home was not suitable for someone with temporary mobility issues. She would need either in-home care or a short-stay rehabilitation facility after her discharge. Since the sale of her house had fallen through and she had limited funds, the options were complicated. I told them I couldn't take her in because I had a restraining order for an important reason, and I planned to continue using it. Shortly before my mother was discharged from the hospital, Frank contacted me. Despite their breakup, he had been visiting my mother and noticed a significant change in her behavior. The infection and subsequent treatment had required her to stop drinking completely for several weeks. The doctors had also adjusted her psychiatric medications. Frank described her as more like the woman he had known years before, calmer and more rational than she had been in years. Frank asked me if I would consider visiting my mother. She told me I needed to see the change with my own eyes. My lawyer advised me on how to temporarily modify the restraining order for this specific circumstance. My mother discussed her treatment. For the first time in our relationship, he acknowledged his alcoholism without evasion or denial. He expressed genuine regret for his actions, particularly the prank with Bailey and the call to Child Protective Services, without making excuses or blaming others. He also revealed something I hadn't known. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in her 30s, but stopped taking her medication many years ago, believing she could manage it with alcohol instead. The hospital psychiatrist had restarted her medication, which, combined with sobriety, had significantly stabilized her mood. I told her that a couple of weeks of pills and sobriety wouldn't fix anything, and that I should have given it a year before even thinking about it. In the following weeks, my mother moved into a rehabilitation center. Frank visited her regularly and kept me updated on her progress. She continued attending both physical therapy and substance abuse counseling. He also resumed regular sessions with a psychiatrist specializing in dual diagnoses of mental health and substance abuse. After a month in rehab, my mother faced another decision. Where would she go next? Her house still needed major repairs before she could sell it, and she couldn't manage the stairs with her current mobility limitations. Frank found a small ground floor apartment near his rehab center. It was within their budget, but it required the first month's rent and a security deposit, money my mother didn't have after her medical expenses. Frank asked if I could take care of the deposits and that he'd take care of the rest, but I said absolutely not. 2 months after my mother moved into the apartment, according to Frank, who still checks on her weekly, she has maintained her sobriety and continued her psychiatric treatment. She found a part-time job at a local library that accommodates her physical limitations while she continues her recovery. Inside was a check for compensation for the damages she had caused me, along with a brief note explaining this and other things. He wanted to give me some money and respect the boundaries I'd set. He wrote that perhaps after demonstrating sustained stability, we could reconsider contact in the future, but he understood this would be entirely my decision. I haven't responded. I'm not going to close this door if there's an addiction and mental illness problem, but I also know that relapses happen, and I don't want to be around when that happens. If he shows signs of stability for years, maybe I'll reconsider. For now, stay away from me and my children. The irony isn't lost on me. My mother's original request, needing a place to stay while she transitioned to a new life, has somehow been fulfilled, albeit in a very different way than either of us imagined. Instead of moving to Poland, she has moved on to a new phase of her life that includes acknowledging her mental health and substance abuse issues. Whether this transition leads to lasting and genuine change, only time will tell. Update 4. I'm sorry, I don't have more information than this, but even Frank, my mother's ex-boyfriend, has dumped her. When I tried to contact him, he only told me that he dumped her again months ago because he couldn't stand it anymore. My mother has had a relapse, and a serious one at that. She's stopped taking her medication again and gone back to drinking alcohol. It's a good thing I kept and renewed my restraining order when it was about to expire a few months ago, before I found out about all this. I only have information from Frank, who said that 3 months ago she returned to her old routine, and when my mother lost her job and asked Frank to help her pay for her new apartment, he left her. The only thing I know, and this is from a neighbor, is that my mother has returned to live in her house. The only problem is that the house was foreclosed on by the bank. Finally, she was taken out of there, and now we don't know where she is. Neither my aunt in Poland knows, nor I know, nor has Harry been contacted by her, and even Frank has had enough of this woman. No one has heard anything in 6 weeks, and we're thinking maybe she's receiving treatment somewhere, or I don't know. There's also the possibility that she's in a morgue and no one has claimed her. If I learn anything new, I'll probably post it here, but I don't promise to investigate, since this woman has exhausted my patience. Edit: my mother has been found. The police called us to ask someone to identify his body. I had to do it myself, because they needed a relative to do it. That's all I'll say about that person after years of madness.